Michelle Walton. And basically, we have 3 members out. But luckily, we hit quorum anyway. I do appreciate that you've already been sworn in, so that helps. And let's see, communications. There's several pieces of reading material here that I'm happy to pass down. We have the municipal directory, which is basically, it lists all of the contacts in all of the cities and towns in Massachusetts. Something from the senior centers, and the Beacon is a MMA, I think, publication.
You can open this, right?
And there's a remote participation policy update that I have not looked at, but evidently this came to, did this come to any of you in the mail?
Oh, that's good to know.
It was an update to the remote participation policy?
Like email?
I didn't
I didn't get anything in email.
All right, well, I'll send it down, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Sure.
That'd be great.
Then we'll go to, do we have any, those are just all the communications. Do we have any public comment from anybody on the committee?
I just wanted to hit a couple things just to not revisit, but make sure you know that the discussion we had last time on the, pretty much driven from the building maintenance forecast from the Vertex study, is still one of the things that I think we need to keep front and center as we go in a couple months into the budget process. And number 2, I'm still doing looking into the new growth and the relationship of new growth over the years to increased town population, with the notion that we can't say, with wondering how that affects leaning on new growth as a year-to-year increase in revenue, because what I fear is that in 5 or 10 years' time, with new growth, we have enough new population that drives the new growth, that all of a sudden we need additional members of the police department or the fire department or the schools. And so we have to just be mindful of the fact that it's not just money coming in, but it's money coming in that eventually we may have to redirect from something else. So when I have something worthwhile presenting to the committee, I will.
Okay, well, I guess I would just want to say, I think it's definitely worth looking at, definitely keeping front and center, and definitely, I'm not sure that it isn't worth, as you're considering this, thinking in terms of it as policy development.
It could be a policy, depending, again, this is early days. I don't know whether I
Right.
know what I'm talking about.
Right, well, I guess what I'm suggesting is if you look at it with an eye to,
Yep.
this could be a potential policy, how would I be looking at it?
Sure.
So,
And that may actually come as a result of the discussions we'll have when I get something worthwhile presenting to you all.
Yep.
In probably 2 or 3 weeks.
2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Anything else from anybody on the? Okay. Anything from anybody in the public? Mr. Passios?
I want to make sure everybody can hear me. Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. First of all, welcome to the board.
Thank you.
And my comments this evening have nothing to do with the person that was appointed to your committee. It's more the process that was taken to fill the vacancy. As I stood before you a couple of weeks ago, questioning the process as it related to the town charter, I've since received a response from town council. I don't know if the entire board is familiar with what answer came back. I know Terry is. And basically, he said that the 30-day clock never started because the claim is that written notice, which is required in that section, was never given of the vacancy. My interpretation of that admission is that the entire process was flawed, start to finish. If you read that, and follow that step by step technically, the entire process was not followed correctly. Without written notice, there is, I believe legally, actually no vacancy that appointing committee could act on. Again, I'm not an attorney, but my interpretation of his response was that it opened up the entire process to being flawed. And I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, no, and I understand completely. And actually, that was one of the things we talked about at the Charter Review Committee last night was, because my take on it was, well, first, I think I told you, my first take on it was, Finance Committee wasn't in that section, but it is, because it's obviously a multi-member body.
Right.
But it was also, in my 6 years, I can't remember ever sending a written notice, and that's my fault. So basically, that's my error. So yes, there was that. But the other piece that was missing for me was there was no method of giving it back to the appointing authority if, like, say, for example, it was 60 days, we didn't have an applicant, so we don't have somebody to appoint, which we've had that situation several times.
Right.
At what point, so then is it us or is it the finance appointing committee that does it? But basically, I'm happy to, if the challenge goes forward, to see how that comes back.
Right.
But I think there'll also be a good look at the whole appointing process. As
I
part
think
of the
each
charter.
time one of these
Yeah.
areas that seem to be seriously flawed or blatantly not followed will put a better microscope
Oh,
on the
absolutely.
whole process.
Yeah,
And one of my emails, my comment was that, just like the open meeting law, it may not be convenient, but right at the moment, that is the
That's the
Bible
law.
of the town and the law.
Right, right.
So we should be following it.
absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely,
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, I think probably before we get into the policy discussion, I think we'll jump right down to review minutes.
It's fine with me.
Except that actually maybe we can't because you have not seen the minutes.
I have not read them, no.
Okay, so I think what we might do is wait to take action, but I will say a couple of things about the minutes
Yeah.
from the 20. I don't think we can take minutes. Can we take minutes? We can't, can we take a vote on the minutes if? We have a quorum, but one of the members of the quorum hasn't read the minutes.
Yeah.
You can still vote on them.
Well,
You wouldn't
I don't
know what
see-
happened
yeah,
anyway.
she-
'cause
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
You-
She
you
wasn't
were not a
there.
On the
member.
23rd?
Yeah.
I
or
saw
20.
it online.
You saw it, right,
I
okay.
saw it on YouTube.
Right, but, right.
But you were not a
Then we'll
member of
go
the
ahead and
committee.
we'll vote on it. But the other thing I just wanted to, and actually I probably procedurally should take a motion in a second before I discuss it, but on the votes, you recorded the votes as 5-0?
It's 6-0, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I thought so, because it would either have to be 6-0 or somebody
Yeah,
opposed
no,
or
it was
abstained.
6-0, and
Okay.
I thought I checked that.
That's
I'm
okay, because
sorry.
I changed it in my
Yeah,
copy.
Perfect, perfect.
But I basically just wanted to make sure that that was a correct thing to do.
Yes.
So anyway, so I'm happy then to take a motion on let's start with the minutes of August 9th, which was, that was when we talked about the policy change for free cash. Okay, so do I have a motion to accept the minutes of August 9th as submitted?
So moved?
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that's okay. And then on the minutes of August 23rd, I realize that you feel badly because it's 7 pages, but there are
Yes, I-
7 informative pages. I
Yes, they
don't
are.
worry about it.
Okay, okay. I know, it was a good meeting to have a lot of information, and summing that up was gonna be very hard without
it-
getting the full of everything that was going on, so.
Yeah, and
the
that's
full
fine.
understanding.
I don't apologize for the meeting minutes being long, and as you get more comfortable with trying to summarize, I
Yeah.
think, to the extent that we can help you do that, we'll try to do that, and John's really good at it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And I'd like to piggyback on that by saying that when we have minutes like that, a meeting that's so substantive, where people like me are putting a presentation, basically a pseudo presentation together, we should actually have some sort of outline that we can give you, as the secretary, because it's very difficult to keep ahead of everything that's going on in the meeting and participate in the meeting. So that's what I'm going to do, and I suggest that everybody does that.
Yeah,
When we have a meeting like that.
and then
Okay.
I can attach it to the minutes as
Sure.
an attachment.
Right, right. No, that, and it does, it makes perfect sense. And again, if there's a way for me to change the way I do the agenda, so it's easier to identify what we're going to sum up, then.
Yep, this week was perfect. I double-checked comments, or I guess
Okay.
reports, and I was like, yes, I know where to put that.
Okay, very good. All right, then I will accept a motion to accept the minutes of August 23rd with the change to 6-0.
So moved again.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. That takes care of the minutes. I know that Jay had sent minutes out. I wanted to take a deeper look at them because I don't know if it was a formatting issue on the ones that he sent out, but it looked like it was either missing something or he needed to pull something off. So I'm just going to take another look at it before.
Sure.
Because I would have to vote no at this point.
May I just interject one more thing, and that is that I really appreciate the fact that you're getting the minutes out very promptly,
Trying.
prior to the next meeting, and that's really good. You have something like, 30 days after the meeting before you have to have the minutes, or it's a violation of open meeting law. And so it's really good that you're keeping abreast of it.
Actually, I find it very helpful to remind me what I forgot.
Yes,
Yeah, that's what
yes,
you said
extremely.
last meeting, so I was like, I really want to get it by today, like.
Yeah, no,
that way
that's-
it's just
that's
like,
perfect.
and it honestly was helpful to me too, because I was watching the video all over again. I'm like, perfect.
Okay. So we will now move on to the review of the policy areas that the Board of Selectmen wants to revisit. I will say at this time that the Board of Selectmen evidently has indicated that they would like to meet on the evening of October 11th at 6:30. So we'll meet at 6:30, and then at 7:30, we will open the public hearing for the warrant articles.
Okay.
So it's going to be a packed night. I understand that there's at least 6 planning board articles. Okay, okay. And I don't know what other articles might be coming up. Heather, can you speak to at all what some of the potential changes are that the Board of Selectmen might be looking at in some of these articles?
You mean minutes? Or, you mean policy, right?
I do. What did I say?
Articles, policy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's fine.
You're talking
I heard
about-
articles, I don't know.
I probably said articles because I was probably stuck on the town meeting.
Welcome. Thank you so much.
So I can go over briefly. You want to start at so the first one was the borrowing
Sure,
Sure.
we'll start in order.
policy. And the question that was asked about that was taxing to the levy, essentially, is whether we would tax as part of include that in our policy and not tax to the levy. That was one selectman's concern.
Ah, yes.
The free cash.
Okay, so then there's just saying that section B4, where it says the regular tax levy is the sum of the prior year levy plus the increase allowed by Prop 2.5 plus new growth.
Yes.
Is there a question about whether we should not tax the levy? Or is the question that we just need to be specific about what taxing the levy means?
That we should not tax to the levy.
Okay, but this article doesn't say that we are taxing to the levy, it just, well, I guess it does if it says the regular tax levy is this, but that's what we're allowed.
Correct.
Okay, so
It's
when
a
we say
general-
regular tax levy, that means taxing to the levy plus all of the other, so that's assuming that we're taxing to the levy
Yeah.
limit.
It would be a general discussion about the concept of, we historically have always taxed the levy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, all right, so it's exclusive of all, okay.
May I just interject here that that seems to me to be a political decision by somebody who's, by a board other than us, or am I missing something?
Well, that's why the Board of Selectmen wants to meet with us.
Okay, so they want us to talk about, or to come to
Why we think it's a good or
why we
bad
think it's a
idea.
good or bad idea,
Yeah.
or what the trade-offs are
Yeah.
of taxing the levy or not taxing the levy.
Right.
Okay, gotcha,
Right.
all right.
And I believe you met with them once prior on this, having a similar discussion.
On the levy limit?
Yes. It was another joint meeting.
Was it a joint meeting, or was it? I remember it coming up,
Yeah,
but I don't remember it being part of a joint meeting. I just
Oh.
remember somebody bringing it
Discussion
up.
point.
I remember bringing it up with, or having it brought up in my presence, and it was definitely not a meeting, it was just a conversation, that's it.
Right, right.
But not a formal meeting.
I don't think it was, but yes, I know that it's been brought up in the past, and I know that Mark Erickson, I remember, was still part of the board at that time.
Yeah.
Because I remember his response was to say, okay, well, 9 years ago, when I started, we were still cutting positions, so,
Right. We're catching up.
yeah, so we're playing catch-up.
The next policy was section 3.03 for use of free cash, and the finance committee has discussed this about amending that language to change the priority levels of use of free cash.
Okay. Do they,
Is-
is it
So it's
something,
just-
so
it
they
would
just
be
want to firm that up?
Formalize it.
Okay.
Is that, I know you and this board had a conversation about the second priority, changing from the focusing on free cash use to road maintenance, to focusing on using some free cash for the OPEB.
Yes.
And that's what, in fact, I took a whack at that. Is that the issue?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think there's any disagreement. It would just be a confirmation that that's
Yeah, okay,
the
fine.
policy.
Okay.
Okay, and the investment policy, that's, we're waiting on input and recommended changes from the finance director and the treasurer collector on that policy.
I don't think we had any role in creating the investment policy, did we?
We didn't.
I didn't think so. At
Notice
least
it's
last time.
quite lengthy. We're trying to
Oh,
condense it and make it more simplistic.
I'm sure what will come up will be generated, will be better than what we got now, which is good.
And the last one was the
I-
OPEB.
Actually, I think that the investment policy was significantly longer than the whole of the financial policy when we first started.
And I thought the
It
policy,
is.
I think that was like a paragraph when we first started looking at the financial policies.
And it looks like it comes right out of an auditor's book. Like
Ah.
it's,
cut and paste.
yes. So the OPEB funding policy was the last policy, and that was to discuss adding a reduction of OPEB liability and budgeting for any new personnel in the operating budget.
Okay.
Include that into the policy as a discussion point.
Say that again?
So we would potentially, the thought is to add into the operating budget, if we added any new personnel, add the cost of that person's OPEB liability amount into the budget.
Okay.
And leave it as is for anyone who's currently employed.
Right. As far as the 10% of the previous year's certified free cash?
Yep. When we add when you're saying add the cost of the OPEB, you what we're really saying is the cost to the town of contributing or funding, beginning to fund the OPEB liability for this addition.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And that was all.
So nothing on,
Okay.
pardon me?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, this just addresses a subset of the policies we've got, which is fine. That's good. That was very useful. Thank you, Heather.
Okay. So just to go back, and I don't know to what extent you've had a chance to look at the policies and develop any questions about where they came from, or, you know, why we hit the numbers that we hit. So that if it does come up, okay, so if we're talking about not taxing to the levy limit,
And 2.5 is the levy limit, correct? For like all of Massachusetts.
well, it includes even more than that.
Oh,
Well, yes, there's that, but it's the 2.5% increase, but it's also new growth.
Yep.
okay.
So basically, one of the reasons why there's always a fall town meeting is to recognize the new growth.
Yep.
Okay.
And then that gets factored into the next year's tax limit. So there's all of that that's part of it. So I think it's an interesting question. And it's actually also, I guess I'll have to take another look at that policy just in terms of why it's in regular borrowing. The regular tax, okay, so the regular tax levy is, okay, so we're defining that as the rate at which we will hold, so that's basically defined in there so that we know what to hold the aggregate debt service to.
Yep. And as I recall, one of the reasoning was that, at least with the regular tax levy, which is defined as 2.5% of the prior year's tax levy plus 2.5% of prior year tax plus new growth, is that's a formulaic number. It's fairly consistent with the minor exception of new growth. So, you know, when you it means we can't be, it's at least a little more consistent, it's a little more stable and predictable.
Well, I also think that, that it's possible that if we're going to have a discussion around, at some point, not wanting to necessarily go that way, of going to the 2.5% every year, rather than, I think what I would probably look at would be in that definition, we could probably just say the regular tax levy is typically, or can be, or change it so that it doesn't have to be, but that's what we're basing, when we say that we're setting the debt service against the regular tax levy or the total tax levy, that's what we're looking at, is whatever comes out of whatever the previous year plus the, you know, whatever percent we do, plus the, rather than say something that, you know, like, well, and then if we don't do that, then it's still the tax levy. But that, I mean, it'd actually be interesting just to think in terms of that. But I think, because it's not necessarily, this isn't, all this is doing is defining what the regular tax levy is for the
Right.
purpose of the debt service.
Yeah, but it does, in point B4, it does assume that we would always be, we always set the tax levy at the prior year levy plus the increase allowed by Prop 2.5 or 2.5%. Plus new growth. And so, yeah, that was a hidden assumption here that probably is needless.
What, just not define it at all?
No, just say that, yeah, well, we would probably want to define it, but define it not in such a way as to not tie the definition to the limits of 2.5.
Well, the other thing is that what the line actually says is the regular tax levy is the sum of the prior year levy plus the increase allowed by Proposition 2.5, and a 2% increase would be allowed by Proposition 2.5.
Okay?
So it's also all-inclusive of any change.
You've got slightly different words here than I'm reading from this, but that's,
What do you read? Oh, that's
from the...
that's what we submitted to them.
That's actually, that's taken directly from the Board of Selectmen site this afternoon, so...
This is on the Board of Selectmen tonight.
That's it. Well, okay, then I don't know what I'm...
So I don't know what it says.
Well, anyway, that language is probably better than the language I just read.
To read your
What
language?
page are you on?
What
page are you
Are you
on?
on
Okay.
the policy on the website?
I'm on the policy manual on the website
Okay.
through the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
It's
Okay.
on page 36.
Yep.
Oh,
Here we
It's at
go.
the very
This
top.
is,
wait, 50s.
this is what I printed out.
Regular tax levy is the sum of the prior year. Yep.
Plus the increase allowed by proposition.
Allowed by Prop 2.5.
Okay, so...
So I'm just saying that, yeah,
yeah.
2% is within allowed by 2.5.
And it's not, I was reading it and inferring that it would always be 2.5%, but it's not, it doesn't mean it's 2.5% here at all.
Yeah, it doesn't say that. So I'm not even sure that, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
yep.
And I would
Sorry.
just probably just go to the allowed by and say that it's all inclusive of anything up to 2.5%.
Yeah. Sorry to confuse the issue.
Just looking at OPEB.
Yeah, rather than try, because basically if they want to take a look at not always taxing to the levy limit, I'm not
Yeah,
sure
which
that
is in
in the debt
borrowing.
service policy is where I would make that
OPEB.
change. Just saying.
Silly.
All right, so, does anybody have any questions about the debt service policy? Michelle?
Why would we want it to be more flexible?
It sounds like there's, what the Board of Selectmen want to discuss is, because of the tax burden on and the demographics of the town being an older population, do we always want to hit that 2.5% increase? Or
Yeah.
can there be a year that we only do a 2% increase instead of going to the whole, what the state allows?
Oh, and I interpret that as having room for that.
Okay.
I don't see that
Yeah.
as saying, plus the increase allowed by Proposition 2.5. I interpret it as anything up to 2.5%. So I saw that more like the ceiling
Yeah.
of, you can't go above that. I
Right.
didn't see any restriction of that nature in the wording.
Yep, and I agree that.
I think it really comes down to, I guess, voting at like a town meeting on when are we gonna do 2%, when are we gonna do 2.5, when are we gonna do 1.75, for all we know. I mean,
Well, it'll come to town meeting and it'll also come to, okay, what priority can we not address?
yeah,
Because we don't go all the way.
Yeah.
And can we take that hit this year? So, and again,
hard.
as Mark had said, because we're still playing catch-up, and actually, we're not even catching up.
no, we're adding on once that's down, right?
Well, no, we're adding on, but the issue is, so is the population. So what's changed in the last, again, and that's what's going to make the new growth interesting to review is, like what's been happening with the population and the population trends that George has been studying.
Right.
What's been happening with those and their impact on services that we hear from Chief Sullivan, Chief
Yeah.
Marino, the schools, it's like, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out over the budget season. I think the question was, that from the Board of Selectmen, why do we always go to 2.5%? Well, we always go to 2.5% because we're saying no to so much.
Yeah,
So,
But it is on balance a political decision.
Absolutely.
It's the town meeting.
Right.
As a town meeting and saying, look, we're just going to do without whatever we do without. And
Yep.
we'll have an increase of 2% this year or 1.5% or whatever. And,
and you know, and then we'll see how it plays out. But again, I think that when the budget is presented, I guess we'll hear those arguments for and against.
Yeah.
But anyway, at the meeting on October 11th, I think we can get more of a sense of what people are thinking around that. But I certainly do understand that there are people who, you know, for whom who are house rich, because the property
Cash poor.
values are, yeah, and cash poor, yeah.
Right. And also people who have little chance of their incomes rising much more than 1% or 2%.
Yeah.
So it's
If they're on
really,
like a-
you know, it really can over time put some problem, present some problems.
Which goes to the whole other problem that we've had historically with not enough senior housing. Okay, so then we'll go on to the next point that they wanted to talk about in terms of the free cash priorities. I think, just to bring you up to speed, the discussion that we had was initially when we set the priorities for applying free cash, roads and signage were a big deal. And then after the borrowing, it became, okay, so now that we're putting all that money in, and we've also got a standing agreement that until we reach $1 million,
I think, well, yeah, until we reach $1 million, which is a combination of the pothole fund and the $550,000 from that will be, it will be able to have $1 million to maintain the roads in perpetuity.
Right.
That's the reasoning. So now that that's covered, we can redirect the use of free cash.
right. So that was originally written before the debt was agreed to, the payment management
Yeah,
plan was
yep.
funded through.
And
Yep.
from our meeting last time, we've hit the goal now officially? Is that what Karen was saying?
The goal of,
$1 million?
We haven't yet,
Oh, okay.
but we're
we're working towards it.
We're working toward it. The town voted for that 10% each year, $50,000 per each year for 10 or 11 years.
Okay.
And then, so that's playing out, so, you know.
The
Sorry,
scary
I guess
thing
I got
is that there's an
confused.
increase in excise tax of about that, you know, like that betters
Yeah.
that every year.
Yes, yes.
So,
So that means that there's also more cars on the road, or they're just nicer cars.
well, yeah.
So that was one of the reasons why that was there and is now coming out.
Yep.
Although there is some, and I can't, well, again, because I can't hold a thought that long anymore. We did not identify free cash as a source for the capital stabilization fund. We just have that in the budget, is that correct?
You mean within the free cash policy?
Yeah,
Yes.
we did put that in.
It's one of the priorities.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, to increase the balance of the stabilization account if necessary to a level of at least 5% of the current fiscal year omnibus budget.
That's a different stabilization fund.
Okay.
Okay, so basically what happened was, we have, because it helps our bond rating and because we've got so much borrowing going on right now, the policy is to keep that figure at 5%. So within the budget, you'll see to the stabilization fund of an amount that's going to be 5% of the ombudsman's budget. The other funds, there's an OPEB trust fund, all right, so that's not part of that. And then the capital stabilization fund, I don't know if we agreed was part of that or not part of that.
For priorities for applying free cash?
No, for the 5% of the stabilization fund, whether it was aggregating and taking in the capital stabilization fund, or if capital stabilization fund sat outside that 5%.
It's within, because it's still a stabilization.
So, all right. And then I guess the question is, are we comfortable with that? Because that's interesting, because basically, if we're putting money into the capital stabilization fund, then it's reducing what is coming out of the ombudsman's budget for the
The
stabilization fund.
omnibus budget.
Omnibus budget. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I'm sorry?
I said, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's a percentage of the omnibus budget though, and free cash isn't included in that amount.
No, but if we're saying free cash is going, we're going to take free cash and we're going to put it into the capital stabilization fund, then that reduces the amount that's coming from the omnibus budget into the stabilization fund, or the amount that's needed in order to keep the fund.
But the omnibus budget doesn't include the free cash amount.
No.
It's your total operating budget.
Yeah.
And free cash is.
No, I understand it's separate, but what we have is a rising stabilization fund balance that won't have to be offset by as much contribution from the new budget because we've put money in it from free cash. That's correct, okay. But our plan is to take money out of the capital stabilization fund. Okay, well, I'll be thinking about that one.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure, but you're comfortable with it being aggregated within the 5%?
Yeah, I think the way it's written is to be calculated each fiscal year during the capital planning process and based on upcoming large capital requests. So it leaves it open-ended what amount we want to contribute to that amount, not a percentage.
Right, I guess what I'm suggesting is, I don't know that we have a, well, I guess it doesn't really matter, because we'll have to appropriate the funds out at annual town meeting, and then they'll just have to be replaced over time. But to me, I think counting it in that 5%, yeah, that just kind of troubles me a little bit, but that's just me. John, you have no feelings?
Well, I'm trying to get my mind around it before I have a, before I want to share my
Okay.
opinion.
You could word it in excess of the 5%. So it's the regular stabilization on always 5%. Will be above the normal.
Well, in effect, it's worded that way in that if necessary, to a level of at least 5%. So we can, in fact, exceed the 5% if we have have no other better use for the free cash.
Yeah, I'm not even on free cash at this point. I think what I'm on at this point is the stabilization fund itself.
Okay?
And the fact that we have a policy around the stabilization fund that says that the aggregate amount needs to be at least 5%.
Section 3.04.
Yes,
Okay.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
3.04B.
Well, yeah,
They said fund balances.
because basically we're saying that, okay, withdrawal should only be used to mitigate a non-recurring extraordinary catastrophic or emergency event or events. So that's not what we do with the capital stabilization fund. Or that's not our plan for it. So, and I'm reading at this point, I'm reading
Yeah.
304B2.
Should be.
And then in 2C, it's, that it should be limited when possible to the amount available above the 5% minimum fund balance. So I guess what I'm thinking is that it may be not a bad idea to separate out the capital, because we're anticipating tapping it. And, well, we kind of said that, but we left it a little bit, so, because basically we said that when it does bring it below the minimum level of 5%, you have a lot of work to do,
Yeah,
because you have to get it up. As expeditiously as practicable. So.
yep.
So I think it might, I don't know, and I know we weren't gonna, I don't know if it's okay to just go ahead and say that we would like to bring this up at that meeting as well, just to have some discussion around that, because I'm not sure that it wouldn't make sense to have a separate, to segregate that out somehow.
Segregate the capital stabilization fund.
Yes. Yes, because basically it's still going to be subject to a 2/3 vote, but it's not going to be based on an emergency.
Yeah,
It's going to be based on, yes, we know that we're buying a new roof, or we know that there's a capital expenditure coming up, we're going to spend a whole bunch of money on a fire truck, and so we're saving for it.
yeah.
I
think I agree with that, actually. I think I agree with segregating the capital stabilization fund. Because
okay,
that's going to be an ad hoc fund anyway to address certain certain foreseen large capital expenditures to mitigate borrowing costs, for instance.
right.
Yeah.
Right. That was the original plan of the capital stabilization fund,
yep.
so. All right, so I guess we'll have to revisit the capital stabilization fund. Anything else on that? Any questions, no?
Not for now.
Not for now. I have absolutely no feelings on the investment policy. I haven't read it, I confess. Does anybody have any questions on anything that you saw when you went through the policies, financial policies?
I think I'm really unclear about what the enterprise fund is.
Okay. An enterprise fund is basically the sewer is the only enterprise fund?
Sewer and water
Sewer,
departments.
well, water district. We never see the water district, actually. Oh, the small amount that goes into the small number. Basically, it's self-sustaining through fees, so user fees and things. So it's run like a business,
Okay.
as opposed to a town.
Okay.
With,
All right, perfect.
with the caveat that the town stands as a backdrop. If the sewer department gets into trouble, they haven't, and there's no notion, no idea that they will, the way they run. But if for some catastrophic reason they do, the town stands to back up their enterprise. But it's an enterprise fund. It's also isolated from the tax. If you're a member of the sewer, if you go through the sewers, you use the town sewers, that's paid by your usage fee and not by any property taxes, townwide or by yourself.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, if that's it on policies. We don't have the pleasure of the online budget presentation tool. Mark is unavailable. And we don't have George with the budget dashboard discussion, so we're right by that. So we'll go straight to, does the town manager have any reports for us? Not a one, okay. Do we have any department or committee updates? Hannah?
Unless John wants to go, looks like he was about to speak. Do you have something?
Well, the only thing I've got is that we're going to be meeting, the capital planning committee is going to start meeting in, what, a couple of weeks now?
Wow.
And so, yeah. Wow. So, yeah, wow, that's right. And, well, and it's pretty much building on a lot of work we did last year to get a 5 and, for large projects, 10-year window. And so we've got a lot of the stuff is put in place, or at least we know what to anticipate, you know, going into the meeting cycle. And I reckon there'll be some other capital projects that are going to be presented. So, but stay tuned.
Okay.
Where do they meet and what nights and times, or is it?
Gosh, it's embarrassment, I don't have any of that detail. I should, I mean, let's say I have the detail, I just don't.
I can look online.
Well, I think if
I
they,
just
if
thought I'd write
they,
it
if they're
down
gonna
real
set it
quick.
up in 2 weeks, I think usually it was like too early
Well,
for me to
no.
come, so I want to say it was like 3 or 4 in the afternoon typically.
Yeah, it's.
Oh.
Oh, you're gonna be doing it at
Yeah,
5?
5 in the
Oh,
afternoon.
wow.
I think it may be here, right? Yeah. Yeah.
So
uh,
here on the 25th at 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you for continuing to do the capital planning committee. I'm sure they appreciate you as much as we do. It makes everything a lot easier to understand. Hannah?
Yes. So I met with Superintendent Burnham, and we discussed some of the things that are happening for the schools. And I actually ran into her last night, and she told me some more exciting news, and I emailed her to make sure I could share it with you guys. So a couple things. School started. Woohoo! There was one issue on the first day of school, but new.
Saw that.
Yes. So new protocols have been put into place,
Yep.
and they're working on policies. And in case anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about, my daughter went missing for 50 minutes. I think I can say that without crying now.
Wow.
So it was scary, and we found out that the police, we found out in the mix of all this that the police can't contact the buses, and the buses can't get contact from walkie-talkies, so to speak, from the schools or whoever might have the channel. I think it was the company itself, to be honest, in 2 bus routes in town. So there are talk of possibly trying to see what we could do to improve that. There's also a plan that's a better plan, so when something like this does happen, instantly, notifying the police to try to find the buses and make sure to track down the child to see if they're there or not. There's also a safety team that's made up of staff members that meets, and they meet, I believe it's monthly. Do you know? Okay. But they meet, and so they discuss things like this and other safety requirements and plans. It was really hot, so they had bottled water for the kids, like additional, and she kept a check on all the temps of the school, especially Turkey Hill Elementary, because it's exceptionally hot there as an older school. I know we talked, me and her, about possibly adding air conditioning at some point in the future. Don't know when. Something that she would have to obviously go to other people and figure that out. Then there is new banners that were put up and donated by class of 2017. If you go to the high school, they're beautiful. They're on the poles, nice and blue and white, sportage going on there. And then, walkie-talkies for the staff itself at the primary school. They need additional walkie-talkies just for the staff. So I know that's something they're also looking into. And, so this is the really exciting news that I get to share. Okay, sorry. There is a new education channel that they're going to be getting through Lunenburg Public Access, which is pretty awesome. And she said, PTO could go on there and do like a quick little blurb. If anybody does any safety stuff, they can do a quick thing, and then they could add the link to their website or whatever educational shows in general, and really getting the community involved. And I thought that was really cool. And they're going to have their first airing in November. So I thought that was pretty dang cool.
Yeah, actually, that is excellent, and actually,
Yeah.
I had forgotten that that was one of the things that the the Cable Advisory Committee was working into the,
Yeah, I did too,
Access
until she told me
cable
last night. I was like,
contract.
oh my
Right.
gosh.
right, no, that's excellent, that's
Yes.
very exciting. Okay, so I started to talk said a little bit about the Charter Review Committee meeting. Basically, what we're doing at this point is taking a look at the controversial items. And then we added the whole vacancy appointment issue as it was presented, because it really wasn't clear to everybody. Not everybody had the same read of it. So, we'll probably take another look at that. But what we're going to start to do is for those, some of the items that were controversial were whether we would do a select board of selectmen name change. And so we're going to find someone on the committee volunteered to do a pro and a con, because part of what the information sharing for the Charter Review Committee is going to be for town meeting to say, okay, here's what yes would mean, here's what no would mean, like you used to see or sometimes you still do see on questions for ballots. So they'll be addressing that question. A couple of other questions. I think I know that the town clerk discussion, whether it's elected or appointed. There was another one, but I think the one that the one that I was willing to write on was probably going to be having a second town meeting, but it didn't seem that there was as much upset around that one, just because it does give people a better opportunity to plan for meeting attendance.
Yep.
And potentially shorter meetings,
Yeah,
which would be a nice thing.
would be.
But on the other hand, if it takes a long meeting to get the information out, then so be it. But I do think that the first town meeting I attended here, when I moved here, went all day Saturday, Monday night, Tuesday night, and I can't remember if we finished on Wednesday night or if we finished on Tuesday night, because I think I didn't go to one of the nights. I know that, but it was basically pretty
Oh my gosh.
pretty long. So that was the one that I felt most strongly about. Some of them I didn't feel as strongly about. I believe that what the Charter Review Committee is going to be prepared to do at town meeting is just share information about where we are with things. And I think the plan is to bring the charter to the annual town meeting in the spring
Okay.
for vote. And hopefully we'll make that target, but definitely a lot more public interaction, public meetings, public sharing of what we're thinking as a board. And that's all I have to report. So, Michelle, just to bring you up to date, typically what happens is there are, and I believe you'll probably see it on one of the templates from some of the meetings, some of the departments that we tend to interact with. If there's one that's of particular interest to you, that you would like to take on in terms of basically liaisoning with,
Yeah.
keeping up with, attending meetings, answering their questions, being available to, you're more than welcome to say, okay, if you, and I don't know what your schedule is, so I don't know. If you take a look at what some of those committees or departments are.
Yeah. No, that would be great. That would really be great. Where would I find that list?
Typically on the meeting minutes, you'll see a list of
Okay.
Yeah.
when we do the department and committee. We're not necessarily wanting to, or it's not critical to hit all of them, but it's good for all of them to have a contact on the committee. So it's not like you go to every meeting, but it's that if there's something coming up in particular that you think is important for them to know, or they have something that they're going through their budget season and they want somebody from the finance committee to be able to be on top of those things, or George works with Chief Sullivan at the fire department and comes in and says, okay, want to let you know something broke on a fire engine, so we might be looking for more money down the road. So things like that.
Yep, now that makes sense. Is there a particular need that you can think of that the finance committee needs to
Well,
get
probably-
on board with?
I'll look at John and say, John, we have you on everything, so is there anything that...
What do you want to get rid of? I can be in
The,
town
uh,
at 5:15. That's probably my only restriction.
Well, I'm covering capital, which takes a lot of time to do. I'm also covering the library. So if you're interested in becoming a liaison with the Lunenburg Public Library, that would be fine.
Sure.
I know a couple of people who are relatively new on the board have just started their liaison opportunities, so I don't think their liaison choices are yet tradable, you know.
Right.
So as long as that would be fine.
Okay, that sounds great.
Yeah,
Great.
and then basically I would just say, look up the library meetings. I think they meet once a month, but it's a different night. Because
Yeah.
when it's on Thursdays, I would always get confused, because when it was on Thursdays, we're usually meeting, so I can't go.
Yeah.
So I would plan to go for the wrong month every time. But there is a lot of good information, a lot of good activity. It is a great way to learn the town.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And can I just
Yes.
piggyback on that? If you ever want to meet with any of the departments, they are like more than happy to meet with anybody from finance. So,
Oh, that's great to
Or
know.
from any department, so they're just awesome with that type of stuff. I know
Very
they're
open.
nice.
Yep, Chief Marino,
Yeah,
Chief Sullivan,
Jack from DPW.
yep, Jack Rodriguez, Martha Moore over at the library, Adam Burney. I mean, basically, we haven't run into anybody in town.
That doesn't want us talking to them.
Well, it doesn't mind, doesn't mind our questions.
Yeah.
That-
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, people are always very happy to answer our questions. I think they would, even if, we weren't on the finance committee.
Yeah, even if you just wanted a tour to see the facilities or whatever, they would be
Right.
more than happy to do it.
Yeah. Oh,
As
that's
long
really
as you
great.
schedule it,
No pop-ins.
Right. You never know what they're doing.
Exactly. No one likes pop-ins.
Okay, then, public comment from the public? No public comment from the public. And with that, our next meeting is September 27th. And if there's anything that you have a burning desire to discuss, let me know within the next week, and I'll try to get it on the agenda.
Okay,
Please prompt me. I am very responsive to prompts.
good.
Then after that will be the public hearing for special town meeting and the meeting with the Board of Selectmen. There being nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Okay, thank you very much.